If you have a law which governs the behavior of the citizens, you've got to make the government obey the same laws. Because once you have a double standard, then the morale is going to evaporate. And the first law is that money should not be a tool of plundering. A tool of plundering in the hands of the government. Because that's the easiest way to plunder people, which people wouldn't understand. I'm going to talk about the banking system today. It's amazing, and very, very few people realize that we have an unique situation whereby the banking system of the whole world is practically insolvent. Now, in the long history of banking, there were lots of troubles with banks. There were bank runs, there were bank holidays, they called it to sound it better. There were standstill agreements between banks, meaning that banks will not pay, nor will they receive any funds from other banks. There were suspensions of the gold standard. There were all kinds of problems. But while some banks were in trouble, some others were healthy. And eventually they could make the healthy banks pull up the system, eliminating the bad banks, and the system could go on. But the situation we have today is unique because there are practically no good banks. Banks with good credit, banks with good assets, and banks which could come to the rescue of the system when finally the international monetary system will unravel. Because be sure, unravel it will. It's a very complicated situation, so I wouldn't think of trying to analyze it. I'm just suggesting that the symptoms have been hidden from the public's view. The public is completely unaware how unstable the whole system is, and it could just collapse. And because of that, the public is unprepared. And the place where this is most acute is with the pension system. A lot of people, elderly people, or people who will approach their retirement age very soon, they count on their pensions, of course. This is where life saving is. And they fully believe the reassuring words coming from the government and from the banks that their pensions are safe. But the fact is that the pension funds are insolvent even more than the banks are. And when ever larger number of people will start drawing pensions, this will become clear and there will be panic because the people are not prepared for that. They don't have extra savings. whatever savings they have is in the hands of central planners and central bankers. And central planners and central bankers have been very bad guardians of the savings of the people. So the savings are just not there. They will disappear when the need for them to be paid out arises. I have talked about gold for several occasions, putting it different lights, but no matter how much we talk about it, the bottom line is always the fact that there's no insurance against this type of misfortune which could befall on the pensioners. There's no way you can go to an insurance company and take out an insurance against the central bank and the central planners embezzling your savings, except one, which is gold hoarding. The gold hoarding has got a bad name, but actually, as I say, that's the only insurance you have. You have to have your gold in your own possession. Putting gold out, either in banks or in funds or in institutions, especially pension funds, is no good. You've got to have gold in your own possession. It's the only way you can ensure your happiness in old age. Because if you trust the central planners, you trust the central bankers, or any bankers, you may just be sorry. Because when the need arises, you won't have the savings available. People often ask me how I became interested in gold and money in general. And that's a story which goes back to my maternal grandfather, who was an engineer. As a matter of fact, he was a graduate of the ETH, Eidgenössische Technische Hochschule in Zurich. He graduated in 1862. And I never knew him. He died 3 years before I was born. But everybody says that I inherited a lot of characteristics from him. And one of these was his interest in economizing state. He inherited land in Hungary, productive land, agricultural land. And he was not managing it. It was a brother who was doing that for the undivided estate. But he was always very interested in the economic side, the management side. When he graduated from the technical school in Zurich, returned to Hungary, and he became an engineer, architectural engineer, working for the government. They were building public buildings, bridges, viaducts, and other things of that nature all over the country. He married late, he was already 40 years old, and they went on with my grandmother and had 8 children. And the 8 children were all born in different places in the country. And the reason is that my grandfather was moving when he finished a project here. He had to start another project somewhere else. So he was quite wealthy, not exorbitantly wealthy, but he was well-to-do, and he kept control of his wealth. He did not let the children, when they grew up, to take over and start their own project and own management. So the war came in 1914, and one of the sons, who had the same name as I, was given after him. He was a cadet at one of the military schools, training to be a professional army officer. And they organized the Air Force, which was something new, never had been applied or employed in previous wars. And he volunteered. He was only 17 years old. He volunteered and trained to be an airman, a reconnaissance airman. And when he started his service on the front, he was flying reconnaissance missions over Italy. And this son, Antal, they were prematurely graduated from the school and went through this training for the new Air Force. And my uncle was barely 17 years old when the plane he was flying, mind you, we are in 1915, those airplanes were very primitive. I know, for instance, that the propeller was made of wood, and there were canvases covering the wings, and it was just something very primitive by our standards. And infantry fire got him, and the plane was forced to land. And my uncle, 17 years old, was wounded, and of course captured when they landed by the Italians, and they put him in prisoner camp. And although the wound may not have been too serious in itself, but the very primitive field facilities, field hospitals, the wound got infected and he died. He died in the line of duty. So my grandfather's family gave this ultimate sacrifice for the country, the life of a very gifted, I was told that my uncle was very gifted. He was drawing beautifully and so on. Well, that was a very great sacrifice, but it wasn't all, because the government forced people to put their savings into war bonds. And my grandfather was very liquid because the estate had to be sold before the war, because the brother, my grandfather's brother who managed the estate, died, and my grandfather didn't trust hired directors to manage the estate, so they decided to sell. Very poor timing, by the way, just before the war, and so they were liquid in the sense that they had cash, and the cash was put into savings banks. And to show the economy mindedness of my grandfather, he had, I think, several, maybe up to 5 savings banks, and he was meticulously checking the balance sheets and so on, and if he didn't like what he saw, he moved his funds from one to another savings banks. Now, the war started, the government ordered everybody who had money in savings banks to put the money into war bonds, and there's no choice. My grandfather had to do that, and they went through the war, and at the end of the war, guess what? The war bonds were worth 0. The money has lost its value. As you know, Austria-Hungary, which is the country where my grandfather lived and worked, lost the war and lost not just the son, but also his wealth. And by that time he was over 80 years old, and he periodically went from savings banks to check how his accounts were. But the accounts, of course, didn't exist anymore because the money disappeared. And in one of these savings banks, the bank officer used tool to punch it with the message invalid. Of course, the old man didn't understand what was going on, so from then on, every time he visited one of the branch offices of these savings banks, somebody had to go ahead and warn the people, please be kind to this old man, he doesn't understand what's going on. So pretend, please, that the account still exists. Don't punch his savings book, passbook. He won't understand. So please, and this is what happened, actually, I was told. Well, that's what happened. There were a few gold coins which my grandfather had, but that was a drop in the ocean in comparison to the wealth he had, which he lost. Now, I didn't know him, as I said, but the interesting thing, which I never understood properly and I could never explain, but my father and my mother went into World War II having had this experience for their own parents. They didn't have any gold coin either, or just one, I remember, a 10-crown piece. So with this kind of background, you might understand that I, as a young boy of age 11 during World War II, I was watching what was happening, and we could see the money losing its value from day to day. And those who had gold coins, they could save their wealth. And those who didn't lost everything. So these were my early impressions. And that certainly motivated me to think about it. And how is it that paper money can lose its value just like that? And in the generation of my parents, it happened twice, once in 1922-23 and again in 1946-47. And this is the story. This is the background. I'm going to explain how money is being created. It's a very interesting story, and it's actually complicated, but intentionally complicated, because the authors of the present monetary system don't want you to understand what is going on. But that's the true story. And the true name for it is check kiting. Check kiting is in the criminal code. It is something which is punishable if committed by private individuals or private firms. But it is actually sanctioned if it's done by the government, or actually two agents, because check kiting assumes two conspirators, one issuing a check payable to the other and vice versa. And the checks have to go through the clearing system. And while they do, there is no backing for either check, but they enter the money supply. And this is how the money supply can be increased. Now, going back to the government of the United States, there is the US Treasury. The US Treasury issues liabilities which are called bonds. bonds, treasury bonds, and they are payable in Federal Reserve notes. No backing, no provision for retirement or repayment. It's just printing them and issuing them. The Federal Reserve, on the other hand, is issuing Federal Reserve notes, the common banknotes which are in circulation not only in America but all over the world. And the interesting thing is this: these Federal Reserve notes are backed by the very same bond which was issued by the US Treasury. Now you do see the circle, the US Treasury issuing bond, which is used to issue Federal Reserve notes, which becomes currency, and at maturity the bonds are payable in Federal Reserve notes, which is, the bond is payable in itself. This is something which exhausts the concept of prestidigitation. This is the technical world which clowns in circuses and various shows are performing. In other words, is illusionist tricks. But also Ponzi scheme. Charles Ponzi was an Italian immigrant in the 1920s who issued them, and he was put to jail for it. It's just smoke and mirrors. It's hot air money. It's a farce. Now you might ask the question, well, didn't Lincoln in the 19th century during the Civil War issue greenbacks first? And it wasn't as complicated as that. In fact, there was no Federal Reserve then. There was no central bank. What Lincoln did was he issued US Treasury notes which were non-interest paying and just put them in circulation. Why don't they do it today? That's an interesting question. Now, today, there's no need for suspending habeas corpus, although it may happen. I'm not saying it won't, but at present, people accept the Federal Reserve notes without questioning. This is a sad reflection on the state of education. People don't know anything about the Constitution. People don't know that there are certain things the president can do and there are other things which the president cannot do. They are like sheep. They are being herded to the slaughterhouse or to the shearing shed, and they don't protest. They just take it for granted. So this is the little secret behind money. But how long can it go on is another question. Because there will be some breakaway people, people who are ahead of others, and they will one day say, enough is enough. That farce has to stop. I'm Professor Fekete, from Budapest, Hungary. I'm here in Switzerland at the invitation of Johannes Müller Publishing House. They are going to publish my book on economics in German. There may be later English language edition as well. And I would like to say a few words about this book to make it understandable why I think such a book is necessary. I start with what I call an ignored anniversary. This year, 2012, is the 100th anniversary of the Olympic Games in Sweden 100 years ago. This was also an Olympic year, and it was never mentioned what the significance of the Swedish Olympic Games in 1912 were. That was the first Olympic Games when the gold medalists of the Olympic got not a real gold medal, only an imitation. It was gold-plated, to be sure, but the body of the coin, or rather the medal, was only silver. Now mark the year, 1912. That was 2 years before World War I. And that's very significant, because you might ask the question, how come that in peacetime the organizers of the Olympic Games thought it necessary to remove gold from the gold medal? It's cheating, isn't it? It's a devaluation of the youthful talents who were the champions, who were competing for the gold. Pay them off with cheap imitation in peacetime. There's no mention of war yet for another 2 years. Well, some people suggest that, yeah, it was because a year later it was the establishment of the Federal Reserve System of the United States. So they anticipated this, that gold will be removed. Well, I'm suggesting it to you that this wasn't the real reason. After all, nobody could guess what the future would bring. But there was something in the year 1909, 3 years before the Stockholm Olympic Games. And this year, another ignored anniversary, the year when legal tender bank notes were introduced by first France, and shortly after, I mean, maybe a week or 10 days afterwards, by Germany. And they did that because the politicians already knew that the war was inevitable. And of course, the Olympic game organizers didn't know that, but they just thought that if the legal tender will mean the removal of gold coins from circulation, then they should also remove the gold from the Olympic gold medals. I mentioned this in an episode from the history of Olympic Games for a purpose, because I consider it as a symbol of the devaluation of young talent. These young people competing 100 years ago in Stockholm were insulted, really, if you think of it. Why were they singled out and denied their right deserve, which was the gold coin? Well, symbolically, the removal of gold coins from circulation was another symbol. That was an insult to talented entrepreneurs. They didn't deserve the gold coin any more than the Olympic champions deserved their gold medal in 1912. So the gold coins were removed, never to put back into circulation. It's a symbol, and I wanted everybody to understand the symbolic meaning of gold. Now, my book is about a new theory of gold. I've always felt that the traditional theory of gold, even those economists who were in favor of the gold standard, was a negative theory, a negative approach to gold. I'm talking about economists such as Ludwig von Mises or Friedrich Hayek, and going centuries back, David Ricardo. They wanted the gold standard, but their theory of gold was negative in the following sense. Especially Hayek. He almost goes as far as saying that the gold standard is a necessary evil. There would be no need for it if governments were trustworthy. But they are not. So we have to have the gold standard. That's a negative approach. Take Mises. Mises says that it is the temptation to tamper with the value of the unit of money, which makes the gold standard necessary. In this way, the growth in the stock of money is tied to the profitability of the gold mining industry, which the government has no ways to tamper with. So that's again a negative approach. You have to have the gold standard because you want to remove the control of the increase in the stock of money from the hands of the government or the central bank. Now, please, I'm not criticizing this. This is all valid. I'm just saying that this is negative. There should be a positive side to it. Well, I'm offering a positive theory of gold. In my view, there's no need to be apologetic about the gold standard. In a way, Hayek is apologizing for the gold standard, and Mises as well. But there's no need for that, because according to my positive theory of gold, the gold standard has a positive aspect to it, which one should understand in order to appreciate gold. So I'm criticizing Mises, I'm criticizing Hayek, And I'm criticizing David Ricardo because they missed the point of contact between gold on the one hand and interest on the other. They have all missed that. And all the other economists in between. And I think it's very important to understand that the theory of interest makes no sense unless you refer specifically to gold. And of course, you know that out of the theory of interest grows a lot of things which economics is about. Practically, there's no chapter in economics which would not have some relationship to the concept of interest. I'll be more specific. It's not just that these economists have missed the point of contact between gold and interest, but more specifically, they have missed the contact between gold and senescence. Now, this is an English word which is not used very often. Senescence means the process of aging, of getting older, human beings getting older. And man knows that with aging, his surplus of mental and physical energy will give way to a deficit. He will be less and less able to fend for himself. He will depend, if he wants to have a happy and relatively carefree old age, he will have to have savings. And then, when he needs it, he can draw on his savings. That is to say, if he has any, if central planners and central bankers have not embezzled it. And of course, my suggestion is that unfortunately, most of the people who are going to draw pensions, the so-called baby boomers in the United States, if you know what I mean, they will find out the tragic truth that their savings have been embezzled by central bankers and central planners. So this is the approach, how I would like to put gold into the picture, that gold is the catalyst which makes our old age relatively carefree and relatively secure. And this actually is not my original idea. This goes back to Karl Menger, who lived in the latter part of the 19th century, died in 1921, at the age of 81 or 82. And Menger developed the theory of marketability. And there is a German word which was used by Menger, and the word is Absatzfähigkeit. And this is the original idea of Menger. And this is what is missing from the gold theory of Hayek, Mises, and the others. Because marketability is a quality of gold. It's the highest marketable, highest marketability which we as humans can experience in the market when we want to sell or we want to buy. if our money is made of the highest marketability, highest quality material, which is gold, then will be most efficient. And if you start diluting it, introducing other metals, or removing gold altogether and putting paper into circulation, then your terms of trade become worse and worse. Until the ultimate happens, what happened in Germany in 1923, what happened in Hungary in 1947, what happened most recently in Zimbabwe, in Africa, and tragically what is going to happen to the entire world during the next, I don't know how many years, but for the sake of argument, I would just put a number on it. 10 years, maybe less, maybe more. But roughly, we have another decade, a very painful decade, because there'll be a lot of suffering during this time when people come to the realization that their savings have been embezzled. It's gone, finished. There's no way to recover it. And you can actually see it with your own eyes and measure it. Just watch how the purchasing power of your paper money disappears. Year after year, month after month, day after day. And it's going to accelerate. And it doesn't matter whether it's US dollar or Japanese yen or euro or Swiss franc. They are all going down. In fact, some people say it's a race to the bottom. Who is going to reach the bottom first? That is the opposite idea of the Olympic ideal, that you want to be the first moving up, not the first moving down. Now, Mises was a quantity theorist. He made no bones about it. He believed in the quantity theory of money. And I am criticizing him for that. And I say, let's go back to Karl Menger. His theory of money is, in contrast, what I would call the quality theory of money. And he is not talking about the equilibrium theory of price. He's talking about the disequilibrium theory of price. And this is a very important difference. And when my book will be out, you can read more about it. I have little time to explain it now, so I'm not going into details. I'm going to talk about interest. Interest is one of the oldest problems in the history of the human race. It's a philosophical problem, but it's also a problem in economics. And what the amazing thing is that we have solved all kinds of very complicated technical problems during the past several centuries, and great inventions, the the airplane, television, radar, and the medical applications of electricity and electronics. There's an endless list. Great progress has been made and is being made. The amazing thing is that when it comes to interest, we just don't see any great progress. In fact, we have to plead ignorance today, just as they could plead ignorance during the Middle Ages and throughout the past few centuries. We just don't know. And factions of economists on various sides of the interest issue fighting one another, one claiming that the source of interest is time preference, by which they mean that human beings value present goods more highly than they value future goods. On the other hand, people say, no, it's not time preference, it's the productivity of capital. It's the fact that when human ingenuity is applied to the problem of production, then the input is greatly surpassed by the output. And that increase in production, that improvement in productivity is reflected in the interest. And there are many other contentious theories, and no agreement. The controversy about interest hasn't been settled. We are very far from it. Now, early on in my career, I thought that perhaps I also attack that problem, the problem of interest, and try to find a solution which may just be acceptable to everybody. And the idea which I have come up with and which I'm about to write down in a book form, and the book is going to be published in German, because after all, Austria at least, but also other parts of Germany, was the place where economists have gone out and beaten new paths, and the ground is promising, it's fertile, and I am following. My hero is Karl Menger, an Austrian who lived in the 18th century, died in 1921, and he is considered as the father of Austrian economics. And I took the ideas of Menger and applied them to the problem of interest. Menger himself has never written a book or even a paper on the problem of interest, but he laid out all the parts which you need. You just have to put them together and you come up with a coherent explanation of interest. And that's what I'm trying to do. And the basic idea which is new is that there is a connection between interest and gold. You cannot understand interest unless you bring it together with gold. And the reason is very simple. The reason is that gold can be hoarded and it can be dishoarded. You can build up a capital in gold by putting small pieces together, and then you have your capital. But you can also, when you are old and you want to overcome the problems of old age, then you can take golds bits by bits, and sell them the bits and survive in this way. So gold has this property that you can hoard and dishoard it most efficiently. So that's how the theory of interest should start. You should bring the problem of gold and gold hoarding and interest together and treat the two at the same time. Now, after talking about interest, we are going to talk about discount. Discount, in a way, is complementary to the idea of interest. At least that's how it developed. And the idea of discount goes back to Adam Smith, who in 1776 or thereabouts published his famous book with the title On the Wealth of Nations. It's a very significant book, and today we refer to the so-called real bills doctrine, which goes back to Adam Smith. The idea is that real bills are commercial bills payable in gold at maturity, short term. It's never more than 90 days, and the bill can be used as money for that short period. Meaning that one trader pays with the supplies he's getting from another, and then this trader has his own supplier, and he will also accept this. Every time when it changes hands, there is endorsing on the back of the bill. The new recipient of the bill will ask the previous one to endorse it, which is the proof that the title to the funds which is coming is transferred to the new owner of the bill. And it so happened that a lot of people today think that these real bills are the deep cause of the problem. And in order to solve the problem, we just have to get away from real bills, because banks have been using these bills to put into their portfolio, and rather than having gold to pay out when the owner of the banknote turns up and demands gold, they have real bills. In other words, paper claims backed by other paper claims. And they say this is fractional reserve banking. It's bad. It should be abolished, should be outlawed. All the reserves of the banks should be gold. That may sound appealing, but the fact is that during the course of the year, the demand for gold payments is not even. At Christmas time, a lot more shopping is going on than the following month in January. And this fluctuation in the volume of trade could make prices fluctuate. Prices go up during the Christmas shopping season, and prices fall more than needed or necessary during January or any other time of the year. And therefore, there is need for some instruments which could bridge this fluctuation, even it out. And that is exactly what the real bill can do. Now, selling a real bill is called discounting, and it means that the face value of the bill is discounted by so many percentage point on an annual basis. And this discounting formally looks very much like interest, but it is not. And the discussion is about, could we find the explanation for the problem of interest by separating the problem into two. On the one hand, the problem of interest, and the source of interest is savings, and the problem of discount, the source of which is consuming. We should treat the problem of interest quite separate from the problem of discount. And in this way, we shall have two types of credit. One type is credit arising out of savings. These are the usual loans and the interest payment on them. And on the other hand, credit arising out of consumption. And this is the real bills and the discount, which is taken out of the face value of the bill. And I think once we approach the problem in this way, we make great progress. Now, one more thought why this is important. Perhaps you have been bored when you listen to my technical explanation, how real bills are traded and so on. But the real motivation for studying this is because every one of us is involved. Though everybody who's alive today is threatened by a collapse of the whole monetary system. And the question is, who is going to bake the bread? Who is going to produce the medicine we need? Who is going to provide us with tools necessary for survival if the monetary system breaks down? Production, distribution, all will come to a sudden end, because the money which the government and the central banks provide will not be acceptable to the producers and the distributors. They are not going to give up real goods for promises which are not backed up by anything. And the answer is this: if money loses all its value all over the world, all at the same time, as it did in Germany in 1923, as it did more recently in Zimbabwe, and many other examples. If money is losing value all at the same time, then production will not stop. There will be still food available. But how will people exchange? I mean, the butcher needs bread, the baker needs meat. How will they make the exchange if there is no money? Well, I tell you, through real bills. Traders, when they make the exchange, will write the bill. The bill will mature in, say, 90 days. And by the end of the 90-day period, which, mind you, is 3 months, considerable, people who want the good so badly they will pay gold. And this is what will happen. Gold will come back because the bills have no value unless at maturity they are paid in gold coin. So that is the significance of discount, real bills, and gold. If the collapse comes, as it will, then food, medicine, and other necessities of life will be provided through trading bills and paying with the gold coin at maturity. Believe it or not, a large part of economics has been expunged, eliminated by mainstream economics. This part is called self-liquidating credit. This means bank credit which is backed not by gold, but by consumer goods which are in the last phases of moving from the producer to the consumer. And they have a built-in power which can finance credit. And this is what is known as self-liquidating credit. And the source of this self-liquidating credit excuse me, is not savings. Paradoxically, it is consumption. The origin of self-liquidating credit has nothing to do with people saving for old age or a rainy day or because they want to start a business later on, but with the fact that we are all consumers, we just have to rely on the movement of consumer goods to us. And the consumer goods in motion acquire a great momentum. And this momentum is manifested by the self-liquidating credit. The origin of this theory of self-liquidating credit goes back to Germany in the 19th century. There are some great theorists of bank credit in Germany at that time, and they developed this theory. And this theory was actually used in practice up until World War I, 1914. International trade was very wide. Goods moved, consumer goods moved freely through international boundaries, and they were financed by international bills of exchange, what we for short call real bills. And there was tremendous prosperity before World War I as far as the population was concerned. There's practically no unemployment. Those who wanted to earn wages, they could find a job. Those who wanted to go into business for themselves could open a small shop, boutique, and build it up from scratch. It was wide open to talent and diligence, industry, all these old-fashioned virtues. People could succeed if they could concentrate on their enterprise. This whole theory of self-liquidating credit was wiped out. And today they actually deny that there's such a thing. And even those economists who otherwise have a sound economic foundation, and they declare themselves Austrian because they attach themselves to the Austrian school of economics, which was founded by Karl Menger and continued by Mises and Hayek. They actually deny the existence of self-liquidating credit, the same as Keynesians and Friedmanites and all the other economists who do not believe in free market deny it. And this is very, very unfortunate, because a lot of energy is wasted through the infighting between what I call the American Austrians and those who are faithful or more faithful to Menger. And as a consequence, rather than concentrating on the real problems, they are just wasting ammunition, wasting energy on this infight. Is there such a thing as self-liquidating credit? Is there such a thing as real bills doctrine, real bills theory, or not? It's completely futile. We should agree that there is. This may sound to you like theoretical quibbling, self-liquidating credit, real bills doctrine, disagreement between this school and that school of economics. But I can assure you it's much more than theoretical quibbling. Some very tragic event happened between the two world wars. And I think my book will be the only book, when it appears, which explains this tragic event. I call this tragic event the destruction of the wage fund. So I take a few minutes to explain that concept, because I think it affects all of us, and it will affect our children and grandchildren as well. The bill market, which I mentioned, well, where real bills are being traded, bills being the financing instrument for the movement of consumer goods, this bill market is what I call the clearing house of the gold standard. Without the bill market, the gold standard is impotent. It cannot accomplish its purpose of being the backbone of the economy, being the most liquid commodity. It's the material out of which money is manufactured, the measuring rod of value is being manufactured. That is what gold is. But only if it has its clearing house, where the real bills, these are instruments, financial instruments, which mature in 3 months, or 13 weeks, or 91 days, a quarter of the year. And they will mature into gold. They will be payable in gold coin when they expire, when they mature. And this is how you understand the importance of real bills. Now, 91 days is the period of time when a lot of workers are manufacturing the various implements which ultimately reaches the consumer. It means that for 91 days, these things, semi-finished products, are not yet ready to be sold to the consumer. They have 91 days, 13 weeks, to be market ready when they can be sold for cash. But these workers who are working on these, which will be sold only 91 days later, or less than 91 days, whatever, it's not going to be cash. And therefore the wages of these workers will have to be advanced from a source of credit. And we call this the wage fund. The wage fund is that source of credit which pays the wages of the workers who produce semi-finished goods on the way to the ultimate consumer. And if this wage fund is not available, if the credit to pay these wages is not available, then the workers will not be able to be paid. They will not get their wages. they'll be laid off and there will be unemployment. And this is exactly what happened. And none of the economists realized that when they eliminated the gold standard, the gold coins in circulation, then they destroyed the wage fund. The workers could not get paid weekly. And since they couldn't get paid, they were laid off. And that's exactly what happened. To understand this, we have to refer specifically to the bill market, the clearing house of the gold standard. And I mentioned the historic event in 1925, Britain went back on the gold standard, not the gold coin standard. The sovereign, the British gold coin, the £1 gold coin, was not reintroduced. You could get gold only if you had enough paper money to buy 400 ounces or 12.5 kilograms of gold bars. It's something as big as a brick, a little bit smaller. Solid gold. They call it good delivery bar. If you had that much money, you could get your brick of gold, but no gold coins, you see. And as a consequence, there was no clearing house, no bill market. Britain, which offered the facility for bill trading before World War I, withdrew that facility. The circulation of gold bills, of real bills, of self-liquidating credit was eliminated. And they didn't think of the consequences. Politicians, economists just ignored and did not want to bother with looking, well, what will that change result in a few years' time, or in a decade's time? And the very tragic thing did actually happen. The wage fund was destroyed because the wage earner was paid out of the circulating real bills. Most of that bill circulation was in fact the wage fund. And once this was withdrawn, Britain could go back nominally on a gold standard. It did not help because the gold standard was ineffective. It was impotent without its clearing house, the bill market. So what the question arises, why did Britain do that? Why did the victorious Entente powers eliminated real bill circulation? Well, the records are not in the public domain. They never reveal the secret negotiations which, going way back to the armistice of 1918 and the peace treaties at Versailles in 1919 and 1920, that they will not allow real bills to go back and perform the job they did before the war. But the picture is quite clear. They did this because they were afraid of German competition after the peace treaty is signed. And they eliminated multilateral trade, which was represented by the gold standard with real bills, and they wanted bilateral trade, two countries trade, but a real bill which goes from country to country and does the clearing of these various debits and credits which arise in world trade was eliminated. The economists of the Entente powers were blind to see the dire consequences, the coming disaster in the form of the Great Depression of the 1930s. There was one exception. Heinrich Rittershausen, a German economist, did see it, and he was practically the only one who did see this catastrophe to approaching, the tremendous unemployment. It was unprecedented in all history. But the warnings of Rittershausen were dismissed as German chauvinistic propaganda. The gold standard was made the whipping boy responsible for the unprecedented wave of unemployment. That judgment is still outstanding. No economist stood up to say that the fault lay not with the gold standard, but with the decision to castrate the gold standard by removing its clearinghouse, the bill market. So in my book, I'm talking about a positive theory of gold. I'm talking about the clearing house of the gold standard. I'm talking about the tragic event of the destruction, unwitting destruction of the wage fund, which was the basic cause of the Great Depression and this unprecedented wave of unemployment which happened in the 1930s. But history actually repeats itself. We now face another disastrous financial crisis since 2008. This financial crisis has the same problem, namely the removal of gold coins from circulation, and in this case it's the blocking of gold coins to return to circulations. No government in the world today wants circulating gold coins, and that is the real cause of unemployment, because the gold coin circulation is very much like recycling water in the atmosphere. There is evaporation of water from oceans, lakes, rivers, and then the clouds form, and then precipitation and rain or snow or other forms of precipitation coming back, and then the cycle starts again. The same with the gold coin. The gold coin goes into the hands of the workers and producers and those people who are being paid for their labor, manual or mental labor, which they contribute to the economy. And they spend part of their wages, and then the gold coin flows into the retail shop from the retail. The bills are drawn on the retailer by the wholesaler, and then it goes from hand to hand throughout the supply chain of the consumer goods, and the gold coin ultimately comes back again to pay the wages. And if you have that, then you have a healthy economy, and you have no unemployment problem because the wage fund is there. It's this short-term credit, self-liquidating credit, which is the backbone of the wage fund. Wages can be paid even though the consumer good will not be sold for another 90 days, but the wages can be paid because the gold coin is in circulation. And as a consequence, the economy is well balanced. The flow of consumer goods is uninhibited, and production can just continue without any disturbance. Now, this was the 19th century mechanism. In the 20th century, the gold coins were withdrawn, the wage fund was destroyed, and ultimately the gold standard was destroyed by government. So by the year 1971, the gold standard disappeared. And ever after, a huge explosion of paper money followed. And this accelerated by 2008. And now we are at the verge of a collapse. This is the problem now we are facing. Without gold circulation, the self-regenerating powers of the economy are non-operative. They cannot heal the wounds which occur during these periods. So the economy sinks and sinks further into the quagmire. And because of this, we are going to have a similar situation to what we had in the 1930s, the Great Depression, and the destruction of the wage fund. We'll have more and more unemployment, and more firms going bankrupt, and more financial problems. The banks are bankrupt too. It's not yet admitted, but the fact is that the bookkeeping standards have been compromised beyond repair. So actually, the balance sheet of the banks do not represent the real situation, because the banks balance their books by putting more government bonds into their balance sheet. And the result of that is that all the bad debt is accumulating in the hands of the government. This comes from the Keynesian theory that the government is omnipotent. The government debt is always good. The government debt can be increased indefinitely because the government debt can be always rolled over. Well, what we learn from the European experience, not yet in America, but in Europe, it's quite clear that this so-called sovereign debt crisis indicates that the government debt cannot be rolled over forever. The government debt does have a limit, just like private debt has a limit. And if you do not solve that problem of debt retirement, then the bad debt accumulates in the attic upstairs until it reaches its threshold, and the whole mass, lot of garbage comes crashing down from the attic and buries the economy. And we have not even talked about the sovereign debt problem of the United States, but that is the biggest threat of them all. What happened is that the gold coin has been removed from the economy quite some time ago, and it has not, we have not been able to replace it with anything, because what we need is an ultimate extinguisher of debt. And there's only one such ultimate extinguisher, and that is the gold coin. Because when you pay your debt with a gold coin, then the debt is extinguished. But if you pay your debt with paper money of whatever country, United States, Japan, Switzerland, doesn't matter. It's not an ultimate extinguishing of the debt. It's just shifting the debt from the bank to the treasury, from the treasury of a European country to the Federal Reserve of the United States, and from the Federal Reserve of the United States to the treasury. And that's not an ultimate extinguishing. It's just shifting that. And once it accumulates in the US Treasury, that's the end of the game. Then there is no rescue. And why? Because the gold coin has been withdrawn from circulation, and with it, the ultimate extinguisher of that is gone. So I am just finishing with this word, and that is what I'm going to elaborate in much greater details in my book, that we have this sovereign debt crisis, and this shows the destruction of the wage fund, the cause of the unemployment. It shows that the regenerative power of the economy is gone, it's finished, and eventually the law and order will break down. The unemployed people will go on the streets and will face a situation which ultimately the government can no longer control. And unless we do something about it, unless we do this educational job of enlightening people, of showing people that gold is not a frill, gold is not a luxury, but it is an integral part of the blood circulation of the economy, which has the power of destroying the invading debt, like the diseases. The human body has a system to kill the invading infection, and it's the white corpuscles which do that job, fighting the invading diseases. In the economy, it's the gold corpuscles of the money circulation which reflect that same effect in the human body, fighting infection. It's the protection of the human organism against these diseases. And that is what is missing. And this is a tremendous education job, convincing people that without restoring the gold coin circulation, our economy, the world economy, is exposed to the utmost danger. And that is what I'm hoping that my book will accomplish, to contribute to this educational job which we face. Thank you very much. We'll be talking about war and peace. Under our present monetary arrangements in this world, there's no chance for peace. Because what is actually happening is that the United States is financing its wars simply by printing money. So if the war is dragged out, then they print more. And if the war is over for other reasons, then they will find it possible, and also it will be urgent to start new wars somewhere else. There was no peace in the 20th century, there's no peace in the 21st, and this keeps going on. Before World War I, the idea was that wars are financed by gold. So if the gold runs out, they have to make peace. That's logical, isn't it? And in fact, people like Henry Ford predicted that the war will be over, started in the summer of 1914, the war will be over by Christmas. All the soldiers can come home and celebrate Christmas with their families. Why? Because the gold has run out. It's too expensive. Wars are very expensive. And then World War I also showed that it's possible to finance wars with paper, and even bloodier wars, and there is just no end to it. So if we want to survive, if human race wants to survive, then we have to go back to the gold standard, because the gold standard is a natural thing in the sense that you cannot perpetuate wars. If there are wars, and perhaps that's inevitable, I'm not arguing that wars could be outlawed, because it might be part of our nature, but they should be limited. This idea of unlimited wars, perpetual conflicts, which absorbs most of the energies of the human race and also most of the natural resources, is insane. So this is another aspect of the question of gold, that if we want peace, we just have to have gold. The role of gold in the question of war and peace is very important. If we want peace, we have to have a gold-based monetary system. And then wars will be limited and peace will be lasting. Just imagine, for the sake of argument, that we are in the year 2100, 2100. It's quite a bit of time from here. And we are looking back of history. What happened in the year 2012? And when we realize that in 2012, governments were printing money and they were falling over themselves. One country wanted to print more than the other. They were racing. They were destroying the value of their paper money, only to fight senseless wars. What would these people in 2100 think of their predecessors? They would justly think that those people and their institutions, their governments, were insane. This globe is very rich in natural resources, and human ingenuity is extremely rich. We come up with fantastic inventions, and we have technology, we have know-how, and this earth could be a paradise, converted. We could change even the climate, it's not too much to say. And instead we just fight stupid little wars over nothing. And nothing comes out of it. If you ask yourself the question, what was accomplished by World War I? Nothing. What was accomplished by World War II? Nothing, or worse than nothing, because the destruction and the tremendous sacrifice in human lives was not worth it. So I would like us to think about the gold-based monetary system as a recipe for lasting peace. Where is this road leading to? Speaking monetarily, the world has the present monetary system from which gold has been eliminated, and as a consequence, there is no way to control the growth of debt. This is very important to understand. And I keep emphasizing this, that there is only one agent which can ultimately extinguish debt. And I say ultimately as opposed to shifting debt. Of course, that can be shifted from the individual to the bank, or vice versa, from one person to another. But it's not the same as eliminating or extinguishing debt. If you want to extinguish debt, there's only one way, and this is paying gold money. And that will extinguish that, because all other instruments are also a liability of someone else. So you're not extinguishing that when you pay US dollars, Swiss francs, Japanese yens, what have you, because these are also liabilities. You are just substituting one liability with another one. That's not the same as extinguishing. So because the countries, all the countries of the world, have eliminated gold from the monetary system, and it's still officially the case that gold is not money. That's the official attitude. We may know better, that the market thinks otherwise, but officially gold is not money. Therefore, there is no way to reduce the level of debt in the world. Because of that, we have a monster. The debt tower brings to mind the biblical story of the city of Babel. These people were very conceited, and they wanted to build a tower which would reach to heaven, to show God what they can do. And God, in punishment, confused their language. The people who were building the tower could no longer understand one another. So the bricklayer and the carpenter couldn't communicate, and they had to abandon the project. And the tower, the half-finished tower, crumbled and buried people underneath. Well, something like that is happening. We could learn from the Bible. This is what we are doing in our foolishness. Constructed that tower and think that this gives us more power. We are more like God. and there will be a punishment for that. The system will collapse, and goods can no longer be produced. Firms which otherwise could prosper will go bankrupt. There will be more and more unemployment, and there will be hordes of people roaming the countryside and then from cities to cities and rob and loot, and there will be no security, there will be no law and order, no respect for law. Terrible prospect. People will take the law into their hands. So if we want to preserve our civilization, if we want to preserve social peace, then we just have to put an end to this senseless monetary system, which can grow only because it's reproducing itself. We just have to bring gold money back. Where is this? I would like to make a few comments on the role of gold as far as the relationship between government and the people is concerned. This is very important and not sufficiently emphasized by various discussions in the what I may call sound money movement. The role of gold is that the people can retain the control over the public purse. Because under the gold standard, if you are a taxpayer and the money goes to the treasury, and you don't like what you see, you don't like that the government is wasting a lot of money on different projects, then there's something you can do about it. You can go to the bank and demand gold coins for your paper money. That will send a message to the government that they have to change their ways, because people are unhappy. People don't like the waste which is going on at the government level. And also, elections make sense. Without gold, it's the highest bidder who running for political office who is going to win. He's promising more goodies, more waste from the public purse. But under the gold standard, it's economy, because those who are making frivolous promises and get into office, they cannot do it, because people can always cast a vote of non-confidence, not only on polling day, on election day, but every day, every hour. By spending their gold coin, they vote for the best producer. But the same way, they also can send a message to the politicians to stop the waste. Now this is all gone. The gold standard was thrown out, and with it the control of the public purse is gone. There's nothing people can do to stop the waste at the government level. People, in effect, are slaves. The abolishing of the gold standard had this side effect, that it converted people from citizens who control their government and government spending. They are converted to slaves. It's the government who gives the order, and people have to obey. People are no longer free. They lost the protection of their own freedom as individuals, as citizens, and that is the gold coin. It's now the pressure groups which call the tunes, the pressure groups who can influence the government to spend money which will go their way. And if people don't like it, they are helpless. There's nothing they can do. As a matter of fact, we have the very strange scenario that people can no longer protect their own interest because the government wants to prevent people from providing for their own old age or their education of their own children. If you want to save in the form of gold, the government doesn't like it. They bring in various regulations. Even they can confiscate the gold in the possession of the citizens, which Franklin Delano Roosevelt in 1933 did, just a few days after he was elected president. He confiscated, he forced people to bring the gold and surrender it to the government. If people didn't like the Social Security, they didn't think that it was a viable system, as it turned out that it isn't, then that's too bad. Nothing they could do about it, because the alternative to save in the form of gold was made illegal. Remember, from 1933 to 1975, the possession of gold was illegal in the United States. And there's no guarantee that it won't happen again tomorrow. I'm not predicting it, but if you ask yourself the question, am I really safe in having gold in my own country? I'm sorry to say the answer is no. You have to find another country, a safe country, possibly a country like Switzerland with mountains and lots of places where gold vaults can be established, and put it beyond the danger of being taken over by another government. So all these questions come up, and it's very unfortunate that there is no hope for change in that direction. It's the opposite. There's more capital controls, there's more check at the border crossing points, there's more to report to the government what you own in other countries, and so on. And this is slavery. This is that most people have lost the freedom. They can not even provide food for their own children. The government says, we'll take care of you. And if they don't, that's just tough luck, because they might do it in good times, but when the times turn bad, you are on your own. And if you believe government propaganda, you'll have to suffer for it. What I have been talking about is not merely of theoretical interest. It has a great importance as far as practical matters, in fact, matters of survival are concerned. I would even go as far as saying that our civilization, the future of our civilization, is at stake. What we have happening around us is a grand experiment with paper money. With paper money which is backed by nothing except false propaganda and false wishes. The history is proof that any experiment in paper money is doomed to failure. This has been true in ancient times. It has been true in the Chinese history, which, as we know, Chinese civilization predates our own civilization. They experimented with paper money there as well. After all, paper was invented in China, and ever since, in spite of the number of failures which we have had in history, governments come back again and again, and they try the experiment, hoping that this time it will work. Well, I have spent over 50 years studying history, studying economics, and trying to find out if there is any justification of the government claim that this time it's different. This time the experiment will succeed. This time, the first time in history, they will cover the whole world. The experiment covers the entire globe. Not just one country or a few countries, but all the countries of the world without exception are using paper money. Now, the basis why I am so positive on saying that this experiment is going to fail just like all the previous experiments in history is because the idea is that the government can do something which ordinary citizens cannot, or central banks under the control of governments can do something which ordinary citizens cannot do. And if an ordinary citizen does it, it is again, he is against the criminal code But if the government does it, or if the central bank of the government does it, then it's all right. It's acceptable. It's even praiseworthy. It's a positive thing. Well, what is this thing? This thing is that if I, as an individual, issue promises, paper promises signed, sealed, and delivered, and after I have put it in circulation, then I can stand aside and say, that's all. I'm not taking any further responsibility for these promises. If I do that, like Charles Ponzi, the famous Italian-American, did it in the 1920s, then you are up against the criminal code. You are going to be taken to court and held responsible. But if the government does it, if the central bank of the government does it, and it's dressed up as doing it for the people at large, doing it because it's the democratic thing to do, it's for the protection of the weak, and so on and so forth, dress it up with ideology, then it's all right. Well, I am very positive on this, that you cannot have double standard in justice. If you have a law which governs the behavior of the citizens, you've got to make the government obey the same laws. Because once you have a double standard, then the morale is going to evaporate. Then nobody will take the laws seriously. The government cannot unilaterally exempt itself and say, oh, I made promises, but that's just a formality. After all, look at how people like quantitative easing, how people like more money. And it's Goethe's famous drama, Faust, Dr. Faustus, and the paper money scene, which everybody should read, and schools should teach it, along with other famous dramas and poems of world literature. They don't. They don't. But there is an eternal justice, and this is the bottom line, that there cannot be double standard. The government has to obey the same laws which the government enforces for human beings. So this experiment with paper money is doomed. It's not going to succeed. And we are seeing the first cracks in that building. We have been told ever since 1971, August 15th, 1971, when the United States actually defaulted on its obligations, international monetary obligations, to pay gold at the rate of $35 an ounce for the paper promises which the US government and central bank issued, and it was 4 sitting presidents solemnly confirmed that these are valid promises. Then Richard Nixon in 1971 said, sorry, the situation changed, forget it. We are not going to make good on our promises. So this is where the road leads, and one should be prepared for the worst. those who say that all this talk about the gold standard and the bright future which the gold standard might just bring back, the so-called golden age, is like religion. You've got to believe. You've got to have recourse to superstition. There is nothing scientific about that. It's all a myth created for the benefit of the wealthy who grab the gold and hide it or run with it, leave the country behind in trouble, short of money, so the government has to come in and create artificial paper money and let gold be removed from the system. My final thoughts are about the nature of human laws. Now, of course, those who believe in God will derive the justice and the power of these human laws from their belief in God. But you don't have to be a believer, because you just have to accept the fact that you never do something to your neighbor what you wouldn't like that your neighbor will do to you. You want to live in society. You want peace, and you want to share prosperity. If you believe in that, if you believe that you don't want to live in a society where you have to be afraid that robbers will take your property and murderers will take your life, or the life of your wife or children or relatives, if you don't want to live in a society, then you have to have laws. And very soon the law of gold will come into the picture, which says that you have to have freedom, security of property, because if you don't, then the producers will not produce the surpluses which is necessary for all of us to survive. We cannot be an expert blacksmith and an expert baker and an expert butcher at the same time. We do what we are prepared, what we trained for doing. But beyond that, we rely on others, that others will want to produce surpluses in security, that the robbers, the pilferers, the plunderers will not come and take it away from you. We have to have law. And the first law is that money should not be a tool of plundering. Tool of plundering in the hands of the government. Because that's the easiest way to plunder people, which people wouldn't understand. So you see, gold comes into the picture at an early stage. If you want to live in society, then you rely on the production of others. And these others will have to have the security. And if they don't, then society will break down. And we go back into the Stone Ages. And you have to be afraid of your life, and you have to be afraid of robbers and those who would destroy your economic position. So you see, these, whether you are a believer or not, these are laws of the human society, human cooperation, without which society breaks down and we lose our freedom. We become slaves. And that's the danger. This is happening right now. And the government and the false prophets in universities and research institutes preach that the government has the power to bring all the happy circumstances, prosperity, everything. And the fact is that the government cannot do it unless it follows the same laws which it imposes on the rest of society. And therefore, this is the point where divine law and human law meet. And regardless whether one believes in God or one doesn't, the fact is that we want to live in peace and in a society where we can develop our best talents and we can work for our own happiness as well as for the happiness of the whole society.